Hi. I'm going to read an excerpt from Sparrowhawk. Um, just to quickly recap, John Sparrowhawk is a former captain in the 16th Light Dragoons in the year 1843. He is released from the debtor's prison by a mysterious benefactor, Miss Evangeline, and employed to guard a house in London. It's very cold. It's almost Christmas. There's a lot of mystery. He doesn't know why he's looking after the house. He's been told to keep away all those who have evil intent. The first one that comes along, very oddly, quite late at night, appears to be dressed like an elf. Sparrowhawk chases him away, follows him into the dens and rookeries of Victorian London, and then mysteriously is led through a passageway at the other end of which, to his incredulity, he comes to a house that he thinks he recognises. Any other person might have assumed it a groundskeeper's hut or a gatehouse of some sort. However, its similarity to the parsonage where Sparrowhawk had been born and raised was undeniable. In fact, as he circled the property, that similarity became astounding, not to say impossible, given that the real parsonage was 200 miles away in Kirkham, in Lancashire. He finally reached a pair of wrought iron entrance gates, and yes, they were the same as those on the parsonage, though clearly they hadn't been used for some time. They were not only closed and chained, but deep in dead and frosted vegetation. Their padlock was fused up with rust. Above them, Sparrowhawk could see the central turret of the house, at the apex of which leaned a very old weathercock. This too was exactly the same as the one he'd known at home. He continued to walk around the exterior until he encountered the narrow side gate that he and his sister Nan had used as children. It was made of wood, but had rotted with age. Its lock hung off, so he pushed it open. On the other side lay what had once been the parsonage's west lawn. The wall he found now was deep, snow-covered bracken. He waded through it to a stone path, which he followed around to the front door. This stood half open, icy blackness skulking on the other side. Anyone else might have held back at this point, but Sparrowhawk was too perplexed to think straight. He entered a long wood-panelled reception hall, which, though cloaked in near darkness, he could have walked blindfolded. A door stood open on the left. Through it lay his father's old study. Glacial moonlight spilled into this, revealing shelves filled with dust and debris, a desk and floor strewn with torn books and dog-eared papers. Further along the hall on the right, another door stood open on the old dining room. Sparrowhawk gazed through it, a scene of equal desolation. It had once been decked for Christmas, but now evergreen trimmings hung desiccated from the overhead beams. Goblets and wine bottles lay scattered. Bowls of dates, figs, and scented candles had once adorned the sideboards, but the candles had long ago dissolved and the fruit was nothing but mulch. On the central table, the festive feast was a shadow of its former self. Mice, cockroaches, and other vermin scuttled amid malodorous relics. A goose that was now carrion, steamed vegetables that were cobwebbed husks, an ornate Christmas cape thick with fungal fur. Strangely, there was no fetor, though the temperature might have accounted for that. The few intact panes in the window were rimed with frost both on the inside as well as the out. Ahead of Sparrowhawk, the door to the parlour was closed, but spotting a ruddy light around its edges, he pushed it open. The room on the other side had always been the cosiest in the house. It looked through French windows onto a garden that in summer was a profusion of flowers and greenery. Its walls had been papered in pastel shades. It had always boasted comfortable furniture. Over the large mantelpiece there had once been an oil painting depicting his parents in their younger, more carefree days. Now the room was a shell. Drab walls, bare boards on the floor, furniture shrouded with mildewed sheets. The ruddy light was cast by a few meagre coals glowing in the hearth, though these were sufficient to illuminate the elf figure which waited for Sparrowhawk in the far corner, its arms raised above its head as if it was about to cast some fairy tale hex. He approached it, frightened but at the same time fascinated. The elf made no move, and when he got close, he saw why. It wasn't a real man, but a marionette. It was life-size, but its face and hands were carved from jointed wood and had been crudely painted. Its body and limbs were suspended by strings which rose towards the ceiling, but there were lost in dimness. It was also, and this was perhaps the most disquieting thing of all, a close representation of his father. It seemed that Dr. Joseph Sparrowhawk, the one-time academic, philosopher, publisher and pamphleteer, was now little more than a comic mannequin. Its head lay to one side, its eyes glass baubles containing beads designed to roll crazily around. His chin and nose were exaggerated, punch-like in the tradition of the season, but the lank white hair was the same, the white side whiskers were the same, the prominent brow, the small firm mouth. Sparrowhawk prodded at it, wondering how he could have followed this effigy all the way from Doughty Street. It was solid, lifeless, it swayed where it hung. Confused, but also feeling foolish and awkward, Sparrowhawk unbuttoned his greatcoat and slid the greener back into its harness, and realised that another figure was present. He only glimpsed it from the corner of his eye. It was seated to one side of the fire, where it had blended into the general dinginess of the room. He whirled around and saw a woman. She wore a shawl and a plain, ordinary dress of the type favoured by his older sister Nan. She was seated on a stool but hunched forward. Her hands were clasped on her lap, her eyes closed beneath her dust-rimmed bonnet. "Nan?" he said. "Nan, is that—" He scuttled forward and crouched alongside her. The breath caught in his throat. Nan was dead. Her skin had browned and wizened. It clung to the contours of her skull like dried tobacco leaves. It wrapped her clawed hands like shriveled gloves. "What in the name— What is this?" he breathed, rising and backing away, only to be touched on the shoulder again. He spun around. The marionette was directly behind him. Its arms were by its side, but its head was now upright, the beads rolling in its bauble eyes. Its hinged jaw dropped to reveal a cavernous blood-red mouth, from which a demented squawk issued.